teetering on the verge of failure, would we allow that to fail as well?
Okay, let me first of all take your questions or comments one at a time. First of all, when we came to Congress saying the financial system was on the verge of collapse and there was clearly a need to recapitalize the system. The strategy we laid out to do that was a strategy to buy illiquid assets. During the 2 weeks, and I commend Congress for, this is not a complaint on my part, giving us the authority as quickly as they did. But during the 2 weeks, the situation changed materially during that 2-week period. And I went through that. And
what was it that changed again?
I went through that in the testimony. We had the situation worsen in the U.S. We had a couple banks fail or approximately fail. We had a whole series of banks in Europe go down. We had the credit spreads widen further and further. The situation froze up to the point that there was a market serious change.
And did we not anticipate that might happen?
We certainly did not anticipate everything that was going to happen. But what we did anticipate, we got legislation that was broad enough in the authority so that what we came out, I think the way you should be looking at it is we came and said there was a real crisis. There was a real crisis. We got the authorities we needed, and we went to the heart of the problem. And the heart of the problem was the financial system and capital, and we used a strategy that would work more effectively, and it has worked, number one, in stabilizing the system. Now, you've asked what were the other things that we were considering or have considered Plan B or C or D. And they're only, to deal with something of the magnitude we're dealing with, there've only been one trade-off we've made, and the trade-off we've made is between capital, which goes farther per dollar of TARP investment, and purchasing illiquid assets, which we would have to do in big size. We are also looking at a variety of other programs, but don't involve that big trade-off. I've talked about a program to use a small amount of TARP assets to make it possible for the Fed to provide liquidity to consumer credit. We've talked about future capital programs. Now, with regard to the automotive industry.
Quickly, Mr. Secretary, please.
Okay. Let me also say, for the record strongly, there was no authority, there was no law that would have let us save Lehman Brothers. We did not have the TARP then. The Fed did not have any authority to lend if it was not properly secured. So now, with regard to the automotive industry, this administration has made it clear that through modifications to the Department of Energy Bill 136, we believe that there is a path that leads toward a viability in the auto industry, and we think these funds should be tapped only if they lead to a long-term viable solution. And no, we do not believe that it is desirable to have an auto company fail with the economy in its current situation.
The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Paulson, under the TARP plan, would captive finance companies be eligible for TARP funds, particularly for the automobile industry? Well,
there is broad powers under the TARP to make captive finance companies eligible under the TARP. Under the current plan we've outlined, the only capital plan we have in place, they're not eligible. If we were to implement the program we're working on with the Fed, where we put a small amount of money into a Fed liquidity facility, that facility could provide support for AAA auto paper. And so that is one option that's being looked at.
Chairman Bernanke, you have allowed non-traditional financial entities to come to the Fed window currently. Is that correct? You said that in your testimony.
We've opened the window to primary dealers, as well as banks.
And so, captive finance companies currently, do you have the authority to allow captive finance companies to come to?
If we invoked our If we invoked our ability to lend under unusual and exigent circumstances, and if we were fully collateralized, we would have that power. We have not taken that decision to do that.
But you could do it?
Yes.
Okay. Now then, to the three of you, I wrote you a letter, I think, on Friday, and one of the concerns that I have is that we keep focusing on $700 billion. I think in your testimony just a while ago, or you answered a question, Chairman Bernake, that your total assets are now about $2 trillion, yeah, BETs. A year ago, you were about $1 trillion. Is that correct?
800 billion, something like that.
Yeah. So you've doubled, more than doubled the size of the Federal Reserve really in the last 6 months. Is that correct?
In order to extend credit to currency swaps, to allow dollar liquidity to be provided around the world, to allow access to banks and primary dealers to provide that security, that liquidity backstop, and to strengthen our financial system, yes, we've done that.
Yeah. If the OCC had a bank outside the Fed growing that fast, I think there would be some concern. But the question I have is, anybody internally, Secretary Paulson, with the TARP programs and some of the other things that you've done, Chairman Benake with the things that you're doing, Chairman Baer, what is our contingent liability? Because we're not 700 billion into this. When I just start doing a little bit of a rough accounting, it's over $2 trillion. Maybe it's a bigger number than that when we look at what the potential liabilities in Fannie and Freddie and what you're doing on commercial paper. What are some of the things that Chairman Baer has done to facilitate the taking over the banks? I think the American people, I think this Congress, I think this committee needs to, we need a better accounting of where we are in this, and not just be coming in here and say, well, we need 24 billion more for this and 50 more billion for this and 100 billion for this. I mean, we really have to have, and I'm hoping that I can get a fairly quick response from my letter from each one of you as to where you think we are. What is because certainly, hopefully, you're sitting in as you're making these decisions and looking at what's the potential downside here. Obviously, we hope what the upside is that the economy and these markets start responding. But I wondered if any of you had an opportunity to put some numbers together before your testimony today.
Well, let me make a general comment, which is, I know what the downside was, and the downside was a collapse of the financial system, which would have wreaked huge havoc on this economy for many years. Now, part of the issue we have in answering the question precisely is because these programs are very different. For instance, let's just take the $250 billion bank capital plan. That is not an expenditure, it's an investment. I think it would be extraordinarily unusual if the government did not get that money back and more. And so that gets accounted for as an expenditure against the deficit. That will be coming back in, for instance. The Fannie and Freddie, that is the government is standing up there for the credit of those entities and making good on what I believe our responsibilities were, and what investors in this country and around the world understood our responsibilities to be in that situation. The liquidity programs by the Fed are not expenditures, but they are impacting the markets. And right now, for instance, this year, we will issue roughly $1.5 trillion of treasuries, roughly 3 times more than we ever have before. Now, right now, there's huge demand for those securities, huge demand all around the world, but that is to fund liquidity programs that are shorter in duration. But I don't know, Ben, what you... Yeah.
Only that our programs are mostly short-term lending and well collateralized.
Well, I think the question I just want to follow up as you submit this response to me. Anytime, we all know this, anytime you're making an investment, whether you call it an expenditure or an investment, we all